Hello, this is Robert Kiyosaki, and this is the additional bonus tape for book number 5 in the Rich Dad series, Retire Young, Retire Rich. I'll give you a quick overview of the book and how it pertains to my life. Back in 1985, my wife and I decided that we had best plan on retirement as soon as possible. With my best friend, Larry Clark, we were up in the mountains of Whistler in Vancouver, British Columbia. We were skiing up there. And Larry says to me, he says, look, we're in our 30s. It's about time we retired. And we're getting too old here. So Retire Young, Retire Rich is basically the plan. As I said in the book 3 of Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, investing is a plan. And we came up with a plan so that we would all retire within 10 years. So in 1985, we began our plan. And by 1994, Kim and I retired. In 1996, Larry retired. So it's really a very simple plan by 3 people about how to get out of the rat race once and for all. And that's how the overall story of the book runs. It wasn't a pleasurable story. From 1995 on, it was some of the worst years of our life, but we kept fighting on. And for those who read the second book, probably the most important book, Cash Flow Quadrant, is how Kim and I were homeless for a number of months and were struggling, refusing to get a job. And finally coming out of the process 9 years later, financially free for the rest of our lives. But primarily what this book about is not so much what we did, but more how we thought. A big part of this book is the difference between content and context. And what I mean by context, if you could picture a water glass with water in it, the water is the content and the glass is the context. A major part of this book and this tape is the context. For example, context are the rules or your reality or the culture you come from. In other words, if you say, I'll never be rich, that's a contextual statement. And what I talk about context is whatever you think is real becomes your reality. In other words, you can have a reality but not have the same reality as me. So I hear many people say, I'll never be rich. And guess what? They never will be until they change the context. I can give you all the content. I can give you the formulas, the whiz-bang formulas on how you can make millions of dollars. But if your subconscious or your contextual point of view or your being says, I'll never be rich, you'll never be rich. Another thing I oftentimes hear people say is, well, it takes money to make money. That's a contextual statement, which is absolutely not true. So a lot of people say, well, I can't be rich because I don't have money. So they'll never be rich. Another one I hear quite often is, investing is risky. And as I said, whatever you think is real becomes your reality. And investing is not risky at all in my reality, but for somebody's context that says investing is risky, it is. So whatever you think is real is real. So most of this tape here, or this talk and the book 5 in the Rich Dad series, Retire Young, Retire Rich, is about more context and a little bit of content as how things go. So this tape is the secrets on how to retire young. This is what this book is about and what this tape is about. With us in the studio today is Dolph DeRoos, who's my real estate advisor, my real estate expert. Also Philip Lecter, who is my partner, Sharon Lecter's son, and Justin, who is your best friends, right, guys? Mm-hmm. Right, the best friends. And they're the young bucks. They're 27 years old. They were exactly the same age I was when I came back from Vietnam. And I had to make a decision. I was old enough. I was not a kid anymore. And I had to make a decision at around 25, 26 years old, which dad was I going to listen to, my poor dad or my rich dad? And for those who know my story, is my poor dad had just been fired. He lost his job. He was downsized at age 50. And even though he had no job, and the reason he was fired was because he ran for lieutenant governor against the governor of the state of Hawaii. And the governor says, you know what, you ran against me, so you'll never get a job again. So my dad was basically blacklisted from government, and all he ever knew how to do was be a government employee. But even though my dad had no job, he was 50 years old, I come back from Vietnam, as Johnny comes marching home again, and my dad says, go back to school, get a job, get a higher degree, buy a house, play it safe. And I said, but Dad, that's what you did. You have a PhD. You don't have a job. All you have is a house, and you can't even pay for it. No. Get a job. Job security is everything. So what I was listening to was his context. And then I went over to my rich dad, and my rich dad said, well, If you want to follow in his footsteps, you do what he does. But I wouldn't follow in your dad's footsteps. My rich dad also says something else that's very interesting. He says, the benefit for my rich dad was this, that he lost his dad when he was 13. So he said, at the age of 13, I had to face the real world. I was basically thrown on the streets. I had to learn how to survive. So unfortunately, your dad is 50 years old when he's being thrown out on the streets, and he doesn't have the skills to survive. He says the trouble with school, it doesn't give you the skills to survive on the streets in the real world. So you're always looking for job security, or I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer. You're looking for this protection from the harshness of the real world. And you're like an animal who's been caged all your life, and you suddenly throw it back in the wild, and it can't survive anymore. It's just that your dad at 50 has got to face the real world. And the reason I think this book is important is as we have downsizing coming up again, many of these mutual funds, these 401ks, people are not going to have enough money. They're going to be thrown out in the real world, and some of them will be 50, 60, 70, 80 years old when the real world finally hits them. So that's why I think this program and this book and this tape are very important. So going back again, we're going to talk about reality. Whatever you think is real is your reality. And your reality may not be my reality. All I'm asking you to do is listen to changes in reality, and that's what this tape is about. So with me also is Dr. Dolph DeRoos, and the reason he's here, and the secret to retiring young, the secret is you don't want a job. And the reason I say that is because I remember I was in school. I was 15 years old. My grades were really bad, and the teacher says, if you don't get good grades, you won't get a job. And I said, thank God, I'm on the right track then. And so I really quickly caught that job and grades were the same thing. And since I didn't want a job anyway, I didn't need good grades, and it was kind of obvious to me. But I stayed in school, I did graduate and all this. But the best way to retire young is not want a job. And the faster you don't have a job, the better off you're going to be. And for most people, their context is, well, you got to have a job. How are you going to pay the bills? And if you can't get through that context, everything we say from here on in will not make sense. So in other words, if your reality says you must have a job, guess what? You're going to find a job. I don't have that context. I don't want a job. I never want a job. I've had a job for 4 years of my life, and that was to work for the Xerox Corporation, but I went to that company to learn the most valuable skill if you want to be a business person, and that's the ability to sell. If you can sell, you don't need a job. It's the most important skill I could get. If I want to be a business owner, I had to learn how to sell.